In many parts of the world, people are still waiting for fast, reliable 5G to reach them. The last great leap in how our phones connect is not even finished rolling out. And yet, while the West is still busy building the present, China has quietly sprinted ahead into the future, and it is already winning the race for the network that comes next. It is called 6G, and it is promised to be as much as 100 times faster than 5G, fast enough to move an entire library of movies in the blink of an eye, fast enough to weave artificial intelligence and sensing directly into the invisible signals in the air around you. And here is the fact that should make Western governments deeply nervous. On the two things that actually decide who controls a generation of wireless technology, the patents and the records, China is already sitting in first place. Tonight I am going to show you what 6G really is, why China has already pulled ahead, and why owning the next network means controlling something far, far bigger than the phone in your hand. Let me start with what 6G actually is, because it is much stranger and more powerful than just a faster phone signal. Every roughly 10 years, the world upgrades the fundamental technology behind mobile networks. We went from 3G, which gave us the mobile internet, to 4G, which gave us streaming video, to 5G, which promised to connect everything. 6G is the next one in that chain, and it is expected to arrive around the year 2030. But the numbers being aimed at are almost hard to believe. Where the very best 5G might reach speeds measured in the hundreds of megabits, 6G is targeting a theoretical peak of a full terabit per second, which is on the order of 50 to 100 times faster. But raw speed is only part of it. 6G is designed to do things 5G cannot even attempt. It aims to merge communication with sensing, so the network itself can detect movement and objects in the physical world, almost like a sense of touch spread through the air. And it aims to merge the ground-based network with a web of satellites in space, so that fast connection reaches every corner of the planet, including the oceans, the deserts, and the mountains where no cell tower will ever stand. And to reach those staggering speeds, 6G will have to tap into a part of the invisible spectrum we have barely touched before, extremely high-frequency signals called terahertz waves. These waves can carry breathtaking amounts of data, far more than anything your phone uses today, which is exactly where the incredible speed comes from. But they come with a catch that makes them fiendishly hard to use. They are fragile, they do not travel far, they are easily blocked by a wall, a tree, or even heavy rain, and harnessing them requires entirely new hardware and a great deal of clever engineering. Taming these terahertz waves is one of the central challenges of building 6G at all, and it is precisely the challenge that China's record-breaking tests have been built to crack first, before anyone else. Now here is why China's position in this race should genuinely alarm the West, and it comes down to a word that sounds boring but decides everything: patents. When a new generation of wireless technology is created, the companies and countries that invent the core pieces of it file patents, legal ownership over the essential ideas. And here is the crucial part. Anyone in the entire world who later builds a device or a network using that generation has to pay the patent holders for the privilege on every single phone, every tower, for a decade or more. Whoever owns the patents does not just get bragging rights, they get to sit at a toll booth that the entire planet's communications have to pass through. And as of the most recent counts, China holds around 40% of all the world's 6G patents, the single largest share of any country on Earth, ahead of the United States. One Chinese company alone, Huawei, has filed more than 12,000 6G patent applications, more than any other single organization in the world. If you want to understand the quiet battles that decide who profits from the technology in everyone's pocket, then subscribe to Sinova, because following the patents and the records, the things that truly decide these races, is exactly what this channel is for. Now let me show you that this is not just paperwork, because China is winning the real-world tests too. It is one thing to file patents, it is another to actually prove the technology works, and China has been doing that as well. A major Chinese research lab, working with several universities and the country's biggest mobile carrier, built an experimental system to test the exotic, ultra-high-frequency signals that 6G will likely use, called terahertz waves. And in that test, they hit a real-world wireless transmission speed of over 200 gigabits per second, which they announced as the highest such record ever, publicly reported anywhere in the world. In that specific experiment, that was around 10 to 20 times the speed of 5G, achieved not in theory, but on a real bench, with real hardware. And China did not stop at a single lab demonstration. It went on to build one of the world's first experimental 6G field test networks, taking the technology out of the sealed laboratory and into the real world, years before most of the West has even begun. China also launched what it described as the world's first 6G experimental satellite years ago, and it is now building a constellation of many thousands of satellites to knit space and ground together into a single global network. That satellite piece deserves its own attention because it is a battlefield all its own. You have probably heard of the Western satellite internet networks now beaming service down from low orbit. China is building its own rival constellations, planned to run into the many thousands of satellites, and unlike the Western versions, they are being designed from the very start to plug directly into the 6G standard. The prize is enormous. Whoever owns the constellation that blankets the entire planet in fast connection controls the on-ramp to the internet for the half of the world that ground-based towers will never reach, from the open ocean to the deep countryside. It is a race to wire the whole Earth from space, and China intends to make certain that at least one of the networks wrapping the globe is flying its own flag. Here is the re-hook, the thing to hold on to, because this is the pattern that matters. China has done this before, and it is the memory that haunts Western planners. Go back to 5G. For years, China went from being a follower to quietly amassing a commanding lead in the essential patents for 5G, while much of the Western debate was consumed with arguing about whether to ban Huawei from their networks. And the result is that today, a huge share of the world's 5G technology is Chinese-owned, and the royalties flow east. Think about how stunning that reversal was. A generation earlier, on 3G and 4G, China was a pure follower, paying enormous royalties to Western and Japanese companies just for the right to build its own networks, licensing technology it did not own. It came to hate that dependence, and it made a national decision never to be caught in that position again. So it poured a generation of engineers and state money into the standards bodies and the patent race for 5G, the boring committee rooms where the real power is quietly decided, and it won. That is the exact playbook it is now running again, only this time it started the race from the front instead of the back. 6G is the rematch, the chance for the West to take back the lead, and China walked into that rematch already ahead on points, in the patents and in the lab records, before the fight had even properly started. This is not a country scrambling to catch up. This is a country defending a lead it built while the West was looking the other way. And I want you to really feel why this matters, beyond money, because it is about control. The network that carries a society's communication is not just a convenience. It is the nervous system of the entire modern economy and military. It carries your bank transactions, your government's secrets, your factory's robots, your car's navigation, your soldiers' orders. Whoever controls the fundamental technology of that network, who owns the patents, who sets the standards, who builds the equipment, holds a quiet but enormous lever over everyone who uses it. That is exactly why the fight over Chinese 5G equipment became a national security crisis in so many countries. And 6G, with its deeper ties to artificial intelligence, sensing, and satellites, will be even more powerful, even more woven into everything, and therefore, even more important to control. The country that wins 6G is not just selling faster phones. It is positioning itself at the center of how the entire world talks to itself for the next decade. And it is worth dwelling for a moment on those new powers, because they are genuinely strange. When a network can sense as well as communicate, the invisible signals filling a room can be used almost like a kind of radar, detecting a person's movements, their breathing, even a fall, without any camera at all. A 6G network could let a factory feel exactly where its robots and workers are, let a car see around a blind corner through the network itself, or quietly monitor an elderly person's health from the signals bouncing around their home. And because 6G is being designed with artificial intelligence built into its very core, the network will not just be a dumb pipe carrying data. It will think, predicting demand, steering its own signals, and managing itself in real time. This is not simply a faster version of the internet you know. It is a new kind of intelligent sensing fabric laid over the physical world, and whoever builds it first learns to control it first. Now, I promised you honesty, and here it is, because the hype around this topic is genuinely out of control, and you deserve the real picture. 6G does not exist yet as something you can use. There is no 6G network you can connect to, no 6G phone you can buy, and there will not be one for years. The realistic timeline points to around 2030 for commercial networks, so that dazzling 100 times faster figure is a target, a promise of what the technology is designed to eventually achieve, not a speed anyone is getting today. And that record-breaking 200 gigabit test was exactly that, a test using special short-range signals on a laboratory bench, not a network beaming that speed to a phone across a city. You will also see wild headlines claiming China's 6G is already live in several cities. That is simply false. What exists is an experimental test network, a rehearsal, not a real service. And even the patent lead, while real and significant, is contested, because different ways of counting give the West a closer position than the raw Chinese numbers suggest. So let me be clear. China leads this race, genuinely and importantly. But it is a race that is still years from the finish line, and leading at the halfway mark is not the same as winning. Even so, step back and see the strategic picture, because it is what actually counts. Wireless generations are won years before they arrive, in the patents and the standards and the early tests, long before the first consumer ever connects. That quiet, early, unglamorous groundwork is exactly where China has planted its flag, and it is exactly the ground the West neglected the last time around, and paid for it. The West is now, belatedly, waking up. America has formed a new alliance of its biggest carriers and tech companies, specifically to try to counter China in 6G and avoid a repeat of the 5G outcome. Serious voices are openly warning that America may have already lost this race before it truly began. And the reason the West is this frightened is that it has already lived the consequences once. Much of its own 5G equipment ended up either Chinese-made or dependent on Chinese patents, and untangling that took years of political pain, expensive rip-and-replace programs, and outright bans. Nobody in Washington or Brussels wants to relive that on 6G, which is exactly why they are sounding the alarm now, while there may still be time to change the ending. That alarm is the tell. You do not build an emergency coalition to catch up to someone who is behind you. So the next time you hear that 5G has not even reached your town yet, remember that the real contest has already moved on, to a network that is still years away but is being quietly decided right now, in patent offices and research labs on the other side of the world. And in that contest, the one that will shape how the entire planet communicates in the 2030s, China did not just enter, it entered in the lead. If you want to keep watching who actually wins these hidden races, the ones that decide far more than the headlines admit, then subscribe to Sonova, and the next time someone tells you the West still holds the commanding heights of technology, ask them one simple question. Then who owns the network that comes next?